Croatia before French.
French, okay.
But speaking Spanish.
Ça va?
I live in Spain.
You live in Spain? I kind of live in Portugal mainly. Yeah, but I spend a lot of time in Brazil.
So we are neighbors.
I actually spend more time in Brazil than Portugal at the moment.
Yeah? Okay.
I used to be a journalist back in Brazil many years ago.
Nice. Looking forward to hear what you're going to share.
Oi, bom dia a todos. Muito obrigada por todos que estão aqui. A gente vai fazer essa conversa em inglês. Então, mas de qualquer maneira, queria agradecer aqui a todo mundo que veio participar desse momento tão importante na COP30. Hi everyone, good morning. My name is Thais Lazeri. I'm the director and founder of Fala, an impact studio that promotes social change through communication, storytelling, and strategy. Thank you very much for being here with us today. It's an honor to be here in this space alongside people from different fields and who sit together to think, demand, and co-create solutions for climate integrity information. When we began to think about how to protect the integrity of climate information, it was only a natural that our paths would cross with CAD, which we represent here in Brazil, a coalition that combats climate information, together with our global programs, Life Have a Price and the Integrity Information Observatory, works from one shared conviction. Real change only happens collectively. And that's exactly what more than 400 people and organizations from different areas and countries are showing by sitting together with the same purpose. Information integrity is the foundation of every climate solution. This information is not an accident, it's a business model. Lives have a price, and that costs our future. Climate information moves money, power, and influence to delay solutions and divide societies. Now, almost 9 of 10 people worldwide are concerned about climate. But we don't act like a majority, we don't demand as a majority, we don't hold others accountable like a majority. Because our collective perception is being manipulated. And the cost of lie is real. It affects our health, our cities, our economies, our lands, and our planet. For the first time in the history of COPs, climate integrity information is officially on the agenda. Today is the first day. And yeah, and that changed everything. It means the world is finally recognizing the climate crisis is also an information crisis. If this is the first time, and then we, as a global community, have the responsibility to take the next step. This is what's happening today with this open letter that my dear colleagues here are here to talk about. Signed more than 400 people and organizations, and that's an urgent call. Information integrity is not only recognized, we need to turn it to a political, moral, and a practical commitment. Every climate action begins with trust. That's the spirit of Belém, of our multirão, the power of many speaking with one message. COP30 is not just the opportunity to act for the climate. It's a chance to rebuild trust, the foundation of every climate action. Because climate disinformation weakens policies, delays transitions, and costs lives. It's a matter of human rights, of our global security, and our democracy. This letter is more than a document. It's an urgent call, a call for trust, for cooperation, and for courage. Because at the end, without truth, there is no climate. So now I'd like to introduce my colleague here, Kate Sell, steering commitment member of CAD Senior Campaign and from Union of Concerned Scientists. Kate, from the point of the scientists, why is this call for information integrity so urgent at this moment, and why does it matter for COP30 and climate action?
Thank you, Thais. So for decades, climate scientists have warned of the dangers posed by continued fossil fuel use. And today we're on track to surpass the science-informed 1.5 degrees centigrade benchmark, because the fossil fuel industry and its allies have chosen profit and lies over truth and transformation. We cannot afford further delay. The world is far off the emissions reduction pathway required to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. And every moment lost puts billions of people, especially the poorest, at greater risk. Their health, livelihoods, and lives are being sacrificed. Urgent, decisive action is the only path to a livable planet. And I also want to add that the UN and the World Economic Forum have each declared that climate change and disinformation are the greatest threats to humanity. So to truly make this COP the COP of truth, we need firmly established guardrails against climate mis and disinformation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now passing for another dear colleague, Timon Roberts from Climate Society Science Network on Brown University. And for the first time, we had a pavilion from scientists. So it's really, really important to be here with you.
No, it's my privilege. Thank you very much. It's great to be here. I'm very excited that we finally have this initiative on the agenda. And I think it's a major achievement for civil society and for the effort to address climate change. Because I'm a director of a network now of 800 social scientists around the world in 49 countries. It's called the Climate Social Science Network. And we've just released a book called Climate Obstruction, a Global Assessment, which takes up all these issues. And the point is that our theory of change is that we've failed to act on climate change effectively and adequately because we really did not understand our opposition. That we thought that good science and good ideas, good technology and good policy would win the day by itself, that it would be automatic. But there is really vested interests that want to keep the status quo in place. So 3 points. 1, disinformation is everywhere. It's sophisticated. It's evolving rapidly. It's corrosive. There are many types. We have some typologies that are reviewed in our book and in some of the literature now emerging. There's 3 different frameworks. I'm happy to talk about them to recognize the tactics of disinformation, how they manipulate our minds and our behavior and make action very unlikely. The second point, those with structural power deploy disinformation to preserve that status quo. The fossil fuel industry spends about 10 times as much as the the environmental sector and the renewables sectors combined on lobbying. They spend about 19 times more on public relations. And they do this to preserve their social license to operate. There are many actors, though. It's not just the fossil fuel industry. It's also public relations firms, law firms, think tanks, political organizations, media, social media, trade associations, even university programs and governments. Third point, solutions exist and they're urgent. The first is to know the tactics, know the actors and their networks and how power, money, and information flow through these networks. There's a series of these actors. There's a series of tactics that is, or efforts, solutions to this disinformation. For example, appealing to conservative identities or the identities of the people you're speaking to, debunking and pre-bunking the disinformation. You have to have the right messengers to do so, the people that will be listened to. There's issues, there's techniques like fact-checking. We could do things like sanction those in the negotiations who are advancing disinformation. we could do greenwashing laws that the European Union, for example, has advanced. These are extremely important. There's a bunch more. My 3 minutes is up. I'll stop there. But thank you very much. So just to repeat, there are 3 points I wanted to make. Disinformation is everywhere. Second, structural power is used to deploy and support disinformation. And thirdly, the solutions exist and they're urgent. Thank you, Thais.
Thank you very much. And now we are heading to Ben Beckel, CEO of the Global Wind Energy Council and Global Renewable Alliance. And I just want to tag here how it is so important to bring other sectors to talk about climate information and being part of the solution. So please.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Thais. Great to be here. This is a fantastic initiative, and as people have said, it's so refreshing to see that disinformation is finally on the agenda here, and at this COP of truth, this needs to be front and center. So congratulations to everyone for this initiative, and also I commend the Brazilian government, not just for today, but for the last few years. One of the few governments in the world that's actually taken a position mainly around the elections and around the disinformation around elections, of actually facing up to some of the platforms. And I think that's probably why they're taking this issue so seriously, because democracy itself is at threat from disinformation here in Brazil. So just very quickly, so the wind industry is actually uniquely, it suffers uniquely from disinformation. Firstly, because we're probably the most unpopular technology for Donald Trump. So we have a kind of endless flow of disinformation from the president of the most powerful country in the world, which is quite serious. And secondly, there's been organized disinformation long before that. So the example of whale deaths in the US, essentially AI photos of purported of whales on beaches in the US when we hadn't actually started doing anything in the ocean at that point, and we weren't building anything. And actually the DOE at the time, under the Biden administration, came out and said, guys, there's nothing happening here, but it still continued to spread. And in fact was then copied and pasted into Australia, back to Europe, and many places, essentially the same campaign. And we traced that back to very organized interests, fake community groups repurposing from anti-wind groups to save the whale groups, and so on and so on. So we're very conscious, and we started working on this probably 4 or 5 years ago in the wind industry, convening experts. Some of these people on this panel were at an event we did at Wilton Park a couple of years ago. We've also been building a war room that essentially can identify the source of narratives and the kind of virality of narratives and how they spread geographically and what the nodes are and where they're coming from. But we're also working with a series of partners on community-level initiatives in Australia and in Brazil around trying to do very early engagement with communities and work with trusted partners like school teachers, local fishing communities, people who are actually on the ground to kind of identify these disinformation narratives before they kind of take hold and have trusted spokespeople. There's a lot to do, and there's no silver bullet. I think that's one of the things we've all, there's no kind of solution that's just going to solve everything. So maybe just a few points that I think are important. One is, governments need to see this as a kind of public safety issue, and they need to take a stance. They can't just be saying, this is just free speech. It's a really naive idea. And this is not free speech, guys. This is not free speech, and I just want to be really clear about this. The platforms are controlled by 5 or 6 people. Mm-hmm. And it's about to get worse because we've got the whole takeover of TikTok by Larry Ellison and the Murdochs and so on, which is in the pipeline, right? So the big platforms in the West are controlled by 5 or 6 people. This is not freedom of speech. This is a control of eyeballs and communications by a very concentrated people. So democratizing media and bringing more media and more reporting and human reporting back into the room is going to be really essential here as well, right? And just maybe one point on AI, and I see some of my journalist friends here, we've got to keep human reporting and human investigative journalism. Much of the internet now is dead internet, and it's just AI, journalistic slop with advertising, and nobody's reading it, right? So we need to bring back that excitement and that human angle of finding out what's really going. So it does require a kind of active stance. You know, we can't be passive in all of this. So I'll leave it there. My 3 minutes is up, but it's a huge pleasure to be here working with all of you on this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do believe in the power of storytelling. I'm one, so this is something like really, really important. And from what you just shared with us, I want to bring Rayana Burgos from Network of Terreiro Communities from the Environment, because this is something really important about climate information. It's not about climate only, only thinking about forest, for example. It's about people. It's about human rights, democracy, migration, education, health. And in Brazil, we can say, because we've been monitoring climate information here for so long, it definitely attacks women. So it's an agenda of gender and faith. So please share with us.
Hey, good morning, bom dia. My name is Rayana, I'm Brazilian. I'm a political scientist, specialist in gender justice and public policy. And I'm a founder in a Terreiros Network for the Environment, and I'm a member of Green Faith Brazil. And I'm a young Brazilian of faith from Umbanda. It's a tradition rooted in Afro-Brazilian and indigenous windows, where nature is sacred and our ancestors guide us. I'm here because I'm bringing the voice from frontline communities, living where the impacts of climate change collide with climate disinformation. Just Christians call their temples are just. My temples I call terreiro. Terreiro is a space of healing, ancestry, and community strength. In this space, we learn that truth itself is sacred. Every word carries energy. It can help or it can harm. And today, misinformation harms in very specific ways for faith-based and frontline communities. It spreads fears inside your neighborhood, reinforces racism and religious intolerance, specifically here in Brazil, and creates confusion about who is responsible for climate impacts. This isolates spiritual leaders, weakens trust, and affects our ability to mobilize people and a society in favor to create adaptation and resilience climate. So for us, climate disinformation is not abstract. It's about our lives. It's about a daily attack on identity, democracy, and the knowledge system that protect nature. So what protection mechanisms do we need? First, I think, community-centered systems communicated, led, and trusted by the spiritual leaders, especially women. Second, invest in information integrity, monitoring, rapid response, and regulation to hold industries accountable when they deliberately pollute our information systems. Third, capacity building for frontline faith communities to communicate their own voice with dignity and power. This is the work we advance in partnership with Green Faith, with training and empowering women of faith to speak up and defend their communities from manipulation. We are showing the world that faith communities are not barriers to climate change or to climate action. We are its spiritual backbone. When women of faith rise, truth rises with us. Because with truth, without truth, there is no climate justice, there is no climate actions. The fossil fuel industry has polluted our air and our water, and now it's polluted our information. So we say clearly, stop the lies, stop the delay. We need to act together. Access to accurate information is a human right and a spiritual duty. Brazil, as a COP host, has a historic opportunity to lead the world with truth and justice. And I speak from Terreiros, from the northeast of Brazil, from the heart of the communities who refuse to be silent. Our faith teaches us there is no sustainability without honesty. There is no democracy without voice. And there is no climate action without trust. Thank you, Ashe, good morning.
Amazing, thank you very much. And one of the perspectives about climate information is a system that is rewarded with money, influence, and power. And one of the key areas is how do you see this and find solutions through legal rights? And that's why we are here with Pierre Canet, Global Health of Public Affairs and Policy from Climate Earth. Yesterday, you were talking about how can we reward governance and transparency, and also about litigation. Could you share a little bit more with us?
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Pierre Canet. I work for Climate Earth. Climate Earth is a legal NGO, and so we are using the power of the law to protect people and the environment. I also live in Spain, a country that was hit by many climate impacts, with communities, people, and cities impacted by the worst extreme weather events. Like in many other countries, we've seen the effect of disinformation around these extreme weather events, harming the capacities of first responders, harming the capacities to tackle as well these extreme weather events. So with disinformation, we're talking about real-time harm to people. Right now, we are seeing extreme weather events with floodings, wildfires, heat waves, extreme weather events impacting millions of people. At the same moment, online, we've seen the spread of disinformation, false information across different social media channels. And these false information, can hinder governments and first responders' efforts to provide emergency assistance. Right now, we are seeing also the effect of this disinformation over policy decisions, about opinions, and decisions to tackle climate change. Right now, we can also see so-called sustainable advertising for environmental harmful products, which is also harming the ability to put the right and good solutions for the environment, with these false solutions being promoted, especially on social media platforms. So mis and disinformation can take many forms. For this reason, as a law charity, we are publishing today a new report, policy report, to bring the evidence. And this evidence, with many academic data work, shows us who's behind it, who's responsible of this wave of misinformation. In our report published today, we set out the evidence that the largest social media platforms, Facebook, Meta, Instagram, TikTok, X, are amplifying, incentivizing climate disinformation. And that is seriously impacting climate mitigation adaptation, as well as putting people facing extreme weather at increased risks. We then apply these facts to the EU Digital Service Act, concluding that these social media platforms are falling short of their Digital Service Act obligations in failing to identify and address this systemic risk. The ultimate driving force is the design of their systems to achieve the objective of driving advertising revenue and the incentives they have put in place to support this. Today, all major platforms actively shape and curate organic content displayed to users using algorithmic systems in order to maximize user engagement. Conclusion of the policy report that is very important for this day of information integrity. This is their business model. Disinformation and misinformation is their business model. So what can be done to tackle this when lives are already threatened or taken by extreme weather events and millions of people, let's say billions, actively kind of exposed to this disinformation and misinformation? This is why today Climate Earth joined this open letter for information integrity. This is why we are calling countries to join this effort for information integrity, not just there, now, at COP30, but also back at home, enforcing, implementing the laws to tackle mis and disinformation.
Thanks so much. You talk about business model. I call it a supply chain of lies. So this is something that we need all the efforts. And last but not least, I want to bring Mark Watts, Executive Director from C4IS, to talk about another key issue when you're talking about climate information, the impact in the cities. Because I usually say that we cannot think solutions for what we cannot see. And if we not see climate change as something that is urgent. We are not going to call for public policies. So please, could you share with us a little bit more about C40 and all the work you've been doing on climate information?
Thanks so much, and apologies for being a little late this morning. Yeah, we're C40, we're a network of 100 mostly very large cities around the world, the London, New York, Paris, Beijing, Rio de Janeiro, a number of Brazilian cities here. We're very pleased to be signatories to the open letter, and I share everyone else's gratitude to Brazil, COP30, and to the UN for really putting the issue of disinformation right up there. I think where we see this now is cities have become real key battlegrounds for climate disinformation. It's not a surprise because it's where most people live, it's where most energy is consumed, but also where the greatest concentrations of people who are affected by climate break down, but also where we see really significant leadership. So across our network, the cities in C40 are cutting per capita emissions 5 times faster than the global average, and therefore attracted the attention of the fossil fuel lobby. And we see that now in a whole slew of policies that ought to be just very universally supported and normally are to begin with, where then a kind of massive push of disinformation comes in. So-called 15-minute cities, which is basically about enabling people to live closer together and close to their work, rather than forcing them to live miles apart. Or clean air zones, who's not in favour of clean air, but these have become massive contentious issues, electric buses, cycle lanes, and indeed even huge disinformation about as we've heard from other panellists, so I won't repeat, about when climate disasters happen, what are the causes of those. This is not affecting at the moment mayors' willingness, determination to keep pushing ahead on strong climate action, but it is now the topic that most mayors want to talk to us about. Not how do we implement things like a clean air zone, but how do we take the public with us, how are we prepared for the disinformation that comes when we do those things. So I mean, our approach very quickly is obviously, number one, keep going with the inclusive climate action that makes people's lives better immediately and for the longer term, but also building those communities of trust in cities before major policies are put in place, not trying to do it afterwards when the backlash happens. And we've seen very successful examples of overcoming huge disinformation, the ultra-low emission zone in London, for example, or in Bogota, similar policies, Milan. But now we're doing a lot of work to equip those city governments with the resources to know how to engage with citizens, to have the playbooks of how to respond. But lastly, and I do think this is important, also using what powers city governments have to remove the social license from fossil fuel companies. So increasingly now, our cities are preventing fossil fuel companies from using public advertising space to promote themselves and persuade the public that they are good citizens when in fact they're there damaging all of our lives.
Thank you very much, Mark. We have just 3 minutes for questions, but all of you guys will be here, so please, I'd like to open it. Who can help us? Here and there.
Yeah, Vaideep Gupta from the Climate Change Media Partnership. My question is to Pierre. Since you live in Spain, during the blackout in Spain last year, we saw a flood of disinformation against renewable energy. What has your organization done about it, and what has been the impact of whatever you have done?
Thank you for your question. So 2 answers. The first thing is about climate adaptation. And so we're working in Mediterranean to see how we can use legal frameworks to protect people from these extreme weather events. The second answer is actually the report we published today against disinformation, showing that social media platforms have the responsibility to act and to tackle disinformation, and that is not done according to the EU Digital Service Act that is also applied in Spain. So that's the answer in terms of legal response to adaptation, but also to tackle disinformation through the EU Digital Service Act.
There.
Thank you. I'm Keitaro Fukuchi from the Asahi Shimbun. Regarding this open letter, could you specify the types of disinformation you anticipate? For example, in Japan, when climate disaster occur, social media often amplifies claims attributing them to other unrelated causes. I expect each country faces its own narratives. Which specific disinformation are you most concerned about? And could you share concrete examples? Thank you.
Yeah. Kate, can you help us, please? Yeah?
Yes. Disinformation around extreme weather is a problem over much of the planet. And it does undermine the ability of first responders to do their work, of long-term recovery efforts and efforts to build resilience and people's safety in that moment. So we're extremely concerned about that. I recommend looking at the CAD website, caad.info, for a great report recently on extreme weather and extreme disinformation content. Thank you.
I'd like to thank you, all of you, and for this time, for being here with us. And let's make the COP truth, really. Yeah, thank you.